All right, thank you. I'll mute myself again.
No problem.
Kirsty, this is Mary. Did Michael Bridges and Renee accept?
Okay, so Michael Bridges, I just brought into the meeting. Michael Bridges, if you could say your name so I can confirm I'm hearing you whenever you speak.
Yes, I'm Michael Bridges. I'm here today.
Okay, I can hear you just fine.
Mary, this is Kirsty. So to answer your question, everyone except the only person who's unable to attend today is Dr. Walters.
Okay. All right. So.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt. I see one person on here as a call-in user. If you are not listed, and I have you unmuted if you are the call-in lister attendee, if you could try and say your name if I have not spoken to you yet. I can't tell what your name is.
This is Padma Bulusu. I have issues logging in from the system, so I called in from phone.
Okay, got it. So that is fine. I will leave you. I'm gonna have to leave you unmuted from your phone, Padma, because you're kind of logged in with video and with phone a little bit separately. That's okay, but just remember whenever to mute and unmute yourself when you're not speaking on your phone. Does that make sense?
Will do.
Okay.
All right. All right. Kirsty, I have 4:04. Are we okay to get started?
I think that's fine.
All right. So on the call, we have Kirsty Sanchez, Paige, Eric, Michael Paul, and Padma. If I could ask everyone to put themselves on mute, that would be very helpful. I'm getting some feedback. Thank you. I appreciate it. All right. We also have Terry Hegler-Gray on the call this afternoon with us. And before we get started, I just want to remind everyone that today's meeting is being held as a virtual meeting in accordance with the electronic meeting statute. The requirements of notice, access, and minutes are being met through electronic means. The public and the media are able to view this meeting on the city's YouTube channel. So thank you all for attending today's AC Alternative Compliance Review Committee meeting today. We have 3 agenda items, and the first being want to go around and welcome everyone and then also do brief introductions. We do have a new committee member, Michael Bridges. So with that, let's go, if we could start with Terry, if you could introduce yourself, Terry. Sorry. And she just disappeared on me.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself.
There you are.
Yeah, here I am. Hello, everyone. My name is Terry Hegler-Gray. I am a senior assistant city attorney in the Charlotte City Attorney's Office, and I represent the zoning and planning staff. And I'm going to do a presentation for you today about your roles and responsibilities.
Great. Thank you, Terry. How about Eric next? Eric?
Yep. Can you hear me all?
Yes, thank you.
Yep. Okay, perfect. Yep. My name is Eric Severl. I am an urban designer and I live in the Noda neighborhood. I don't know if I want to share any more or keep it brief.
All All right, thank you. Kirsty?
Yep.
Kirsty?
Hi, I'm Kirsty Sanchez. I work with the planning department. I administer our TOD standards. I'm the staff liaison to the Alternative Compliance Review Committee.
Michael Bridges. He's our new member. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm Michael Bridges. I'm new to Charlotte for about 5 years now. I've been in Charlotte, and I love Charlotte. And I stay right over here in Mountain Island area.
Great, thank you. Michael James?
My name is Michael Paul James. I live in Hoskins Park, and I am a PhD student and professor at UNCC.
All right, thank you. Paige?
Hey, I'm Paige. I'm in architecture, and I live in the Plaza Midwood area.
Great. Toby?
Hey, I'm Toby Holmes. I'm an urban planner and work in community and economic development here in Charlotte, and have for quite some time now, and live just a few blocks away from Eric.
All right, thank you. Padma?
Hi, I'm Padma, and I work full-time at Wells Fargo Securities, and I live in Ballantyne, and have been in the Charlotte area for the last 15 years, and love to be in the ARC committee. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Shad Spencer?
Hey, I'm Chad Spencer, zoning administrator. I work with Kirsty and Tari quite often.
All right, thank you. And do we have anyone on the phone? Mackenzie, did we have someone on the phone other than Padma?
No, we don't have anyone on the phone.
Okay, thank you. I'm Mary Kelly. I'm the ACRC chair, and I'll be facilitating today's meeting. I've lived in Charlotte for over 20 years and live in the South Park area, so thank you. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. We have 2 agenda items remaining. Tari, as she mentioned, will be giving us an overview of training, and then we'll go through our rules and for procedure. And then Kirsty will wrap us up with the September meeting. So Tari, I will turn it over to you, ma'am.
Great. Let's see. Are you seeing my PowerPoint yet?
Not yet. Okay, so now I see the UDO webpage. Now we see it.
Okay. All right, here we go. So as I said, I am an attorney in the city attorney's office, and my primary responsibilities are to advise the zoning and planning department of the city. I also sit with the city council on their monthly rezoning council meeting nights. So I'm just primarily the land use attorney. Anything land use lands in my lap. I've been with the city for about 18 years at this point. I was in private practice before joining the city, and then and I graduated from Duke Law School a long time ago. And I just say that because because I'm fond of the darker shade of blue, and I know that a lot of people are not. So I just do that intentionally. I'm going to talk a little bit about planning functions, how they're allocated with a local government like the City of Charlotte. So as I said, the governing board, which is the City Council, and I sit with them every third Monday, they make legislative decisions. So you're familiar with the rezoning meetings where they adopt text amendments, zoning map amendments, rezonings, this is outside of land use, but they may approve acquisitions and budgets. So that kind of thing is the primary role of the governing board. And they also make appointments to city boards. In some jurisdictions, usually smaller jurisdictions, governing boards such as the City Council may also serve as a planning board. We do not have special use permits here in Charlotte, but in some cities, the City Council may act as a planning board and approve plats and special use permits. We have the Planning Commission that I'm sure everyone is familiar with, and the Planning Commission is an advisory board. They make recommendations to the City Council on rezonings and text amendments, and they advise the governing board on policy. And in certain cases, the planning board may also sit as a board of adjustment. The other role of boards and land use is a board of adjustment. We have a zoning board of adjustment that hears our quasi judicial decisions. So they hear appeals of decisions made by the zoning administrator and other enforcement officers in the city. And they also hear variances. We do not have special and conditional use permits here in Charlotte, but in other jurisdictions, the Board of Adjustment would also do that. Then finally, we have the planning department, which that consists of our staff, the folks that you heard from today. They make administrative decisions. Chad Spencer, the zoning administrator, makes administrative decisions, some of which sometimes get appealed to the Board of Adjustment. And the staff also issues permits and initiates enforcement and advises the manager. So I don't know how we can do this, Mackenzie, but I just wanted to know where everyone thinks that the ACRC lies in context of what we just went over, whether it's legislative, quasi-judicial, administrative, or advisory.
So if anyone would like to answer the question, you can raise your hand and then Mary Kelly can call on you. Or if you're not seeing that feature, if someone would just like to unmute themselves, and we'll see it that way.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're advisory then?
You are advisory, yes. That's correct.
Yep, that's what I was just going to say.
Okay. All right, so this is the role of an advisory board such as yourself. It's to bring a professional and technical expertise to the making of land use decisions that will impact the development of the community as a whole, so as to advise the particular body appropriately. So the particular body in this case is the planning director, Tyrell, because you are making recommendations to him on alternative compliance applications. After getting a recommendation from the staff, you're making a recommendation to him. So you're advising the planning director. This is different from a quasi-judicial board, which a lot of our boards are, because those are evidentiary hearings. They're fact-finding hearings that involve the review of staff decisions or the application of an ordinance to a specific situation. And they're based on evidence and witness testimony. So we don't have that here. All right. So Next thing we'll talk about is what governs the ACRC. What are the documents that govern your roles and responsibilities as a committee? There's the open meetings law, and that governs all appointed and elected bodies. There's actually the transit-oriented development ordinance, which sets out your role. Then you have your rules of procedure. And you also have council policies that apply to you as far as your attendance and that sort of thing. So let's go to the Todd ordinance. Section 1511.2 is the alternative compliance section. It talks, and I'm sure all of you are familiar with this, but it talks about the purpose of this committee, which is to allow alternative compliance with select standards of the Todd district, to encourage the implementation of alternative and innovative design practices. And again, as I said, you make your recommendation to the planning director, and he has, excuse me, the authority to approve or deny the request, but is interested in your recommendation as experts in this area before he makes his decision. It's important to note that no standard may be waived in its entirety. So when we talk about that the role of alternative compliance is to allow for some variation, not variation, but some innovative application of the TOD regulations, it's important to look at the purpose and applicability of the TOD regs, and that's found in the first section, 15.1. And as we all know, Todd is to encourage and enable high intensity, it says, compact mixed-use urban neighborhoods near transit stations. The goal being so people can live, workshop, and dine while enjoying their mobility choices close by. We are trying to get away from auto-centric uses in the Todd districts. And they should be corridors that have been identified as appropriate for transit-oriented or supportive or mixed development, as stated in the city's adopted future land use plans. The goals of the Todd district, I won't read them all to you, you can look at them, but they're in the zoning ordinance, but they are things that you should review as you are reviewing petitions or applications rather, because you want to make sure that whatever innovative designs are staying true to the goals of the Todd district. So going to your role as a committee, your rules of procedure, which are one of the other governing documents, states a number of things about how your meetings should be conducted, when they should be conducted, and I think you all are reviewing that later, and I won't go into detail about your rules of procedure, that you can read them for yourselves. But one aspect of it is very important for any board or committee member, and that's conflict of interest. So conflict of interest, what is it? It's a situation where your duty to act in the public interest clashes with your inclination to advance your personal interest. And this is straight from David Owens' book, Conflicts of Interest in Land Use Management. Dave Owens is he just retired from the School of Government, but he is the guru in land use. And I think that he has a great definition, just succinctly tell you what a conflict of interest is. So that's in general what a conflict of interest is. And then as an appointed committee member for the city of Charlotte, there is a code of ethics policy that applies to you. And it states that any member who has an interest in an action coming from the board or the committee in which you are a part shall, that means you must, publicly disclose the interest and shall completely withdraw from any consideration of that particular application. And we'll delve into a little bit what a conflict of interest means, but this is the impact of it when you determine that, or when your fellow committee members determine that you do have a conflict of interest. This has been in the news a little bit lately, this particular phrase, but interest means direct or indirect pecuniary or material benefit as a result of a contract or transaction in which you may be a part. So that's very broad. So we really get to narrow it down in the rules of procedure that govern most boards, and yours is no exception. So in your rules of procedure, in paragraph 5, you have the conflict of interest section. And it states out specifically what is considered to be a conflict of interest for your committee. Again, if you are impacted financially, either directly or indirectly from the matter, which this one is a little particular or peculiar to you, if you own property that is within 300 feet of the property that's the subject of the application, if you have a familial or personal relationship with the applicant that you believe will color your judgment, or if you work for any business entity that contributed to the subject of the application. So anytime you get an application from the staff, please make every effort to review the application far in advance of the meeting so that you can know who the particular parties are and determine if you think that there may be a conflict of interest, because if you do think there's a conflict of interest that would excuse you or recuse you from participating in the matter, you would want to let Kirsty know as soon as possible. So moving on from the rules of procedure and conflict of interest, we have your city attendance and reappointment policy. So you should attend 60% of all your regular, special, and assigned committee meetings. And you have to attend 50% of the meeting in order to be counted as present. If you want to be reappointed, and you have to attend at least 75% of the regular, special, or assigned meetings. And I'm not sure if this applies to you, but if it doesn't, I apologize, but this applies to most committees, so I thought maybe it would apply to you, but it's important to know what the city clerk expects of you as far as attendance and reappointment. So the next section that we'll talk about, the other governing set of statutes for you is the open meetings law. It's in section 143 of our general statutes. And so the primary question is, who is subject to the law? And the law applies to any public body, and that's a broad term, but it includes at least 2 members that carry out one of the functions that we talked about earlier: legislative, policymaking, quasi judicial, administrative, or advisory. And as we stated, you are advisory, so you are subject to the open meetings law. A question that is asked a lot is, are all the meetings covered? Well, no. Only official meetings are covered. What is an official meeting? An official meeting is in person or electronically, like we are now, that is conducted to deliberate or take action or otherwise transact the public's business. And to deliberate means to, take in information as well as actually discuss as a body a particular action. So, for instance, today is a public meeting. Even though you are not considering an application, you are receiving information from me and you're receiving information from Kirsty. probably with the rules of procedure, and so that makes this an official meeting. So what about conference calls or emails? So conference calls are covered in today's pandemic world. We're beyond conference calls. We're doing WebEx. This was written a long time ago, but they talk about a chat room would be counted as an official meeting. But why this is important too, especially the emails, is you have to be careful with communicating with each other as a body via email. It's okay if someone wants to send an email, but if someone responds and they reply all and start basically what is considered a conversation, then that could constitute an official meeting, and any official meeting has to be noticed and has to be available to the public. So workshop meetings, agenda meetings, and work sessions, again, this is sort of what we're doing today. And yes, these are meetings. So you are taking in information, should be open to the public. So if someone wanted to, so this meeting would have been noticed by Kirsty. We're in this WebEx platform, but if someone wanted to, first of all, it's being live streamed on YouTube, and we'll talk a little bit about remote meetings in just a bit, but it's available for the public to view. And also if someone wanted to dial in, they should be able to dial in and participate that way. So can a majority of your board gather informally or socially without constituting an official meeting? So social gatherings are allowed. So if you all found yourselves at the same party, that would probably be fine. Try not to all get together and discuss alternative compliance if you're at the same party. Let's hope you don't do that. But if you take meals together, that's a fine line, because we can't tell if you're talking business or not. So the tip is to stay under your quorum for any gatherings. So can your board chairman meet individually and privately with each member to discuss a public matter? So the answer is yes. However, you can't essentially take any action through those individual meetings. Do you have to announce meetings? We talked about that before. You know the answer to that, yes. You must give notice of any regular, special, or emergency meetings. For special meetings, those allow, this open meetings law says that you have to give at least 48 hours notice for a special meeting, and you have to state the time, place, and purpose of the meeting. So it usually is a very narrow reason that you are having a special meeting, and that that purpose of the meeting should be stated in the notice. So again, this is an old statute. It talks about notice being placed on a board's principal bulletin board. Well, what that is now is our website. So, and also we have to provide it to anyone who's submitted a written request for notice. So there are news channels and outfits that are on a list and want to be notified of any public meeting. All right, so let's talk about public records, because it's important for you as city board members to know that anything that you do in written form, or even I guess in sound recordings, that are made pursuant to public business, transacting public business, would be available for public inspection. So, what I say is that when you're sending an email or even a text message at this point and it concerns public business, make sure you write it in a way that you don't mind if it appears in the paper. All right, the last thing I'll talk about is remote meetings. So that's something this is new. There was in the open meetings law, there was the possibility, as you saw, for conference calls and electronic meetings, but it was kind of a gray area as to, how they were allowed. What the pandemic has done is require the legislature to clarify the process around remote meetings. Now, as you'll see, this may not be something permanent because it's remote meetings during the certain declarations of emergency. So this was passed in May while we were under the governor's order. And we're still under the governor's order, but it was so that we could continue to have these type of meetings remotely because we could not gather more than 10 persons together in a room. So the things that are important to realize, as Mary read in her introduction, proper notice has to be given under this statute and under the open meeting statute for remote meetings. And then just a little bit about simultaneous communication. So I really think it's best for the public to be able to see council members, board members, if at all possible. Sometimes you can't be physically seen, but if you were in the government center at a meeting, you'd be sitting there and the public could see you. So we're trying to simulate an actual physical meeting as much as possible. And if you can't be seen, you need to make sure that you identify yourself before the roll is taken or the meeting commences, as Mackenzie was trying to verify who was present before we started the meeting. That's very important. It's also important for the minutes of this meeting. When you joined the meeting, if you left the meeting, again, that goes back to your 50% meeting requirement also. But you should also, if you can't be seen, you should announce yourself prior to participating in deliberations if you have a point to make or you want to ask a question, and especially prior to voting. But if at all possible, you should try to make yourself visible on the screen. So let's see. What the legislature defined simultaneous communication. And so what that means is that you should be able to hear what is said by other members of your committee. You should be able to hear what is said by any individual outside of your committee who's addressing the committee. And you should be able to be heard by members of the public body when speaking to the public body. So, this applies to all boards or governing boards that are meeting remotely. So this would apply to the council too. And what you did in your last meeting, I believe, I hope you did, I think you did, was make sure that your votes are all by roll call. And that's just so that we can just be very transparent to the public and everybody's vote is recorded properly. Again, the minutes of the meeting should reflect when you joined, if you had to leave, when that occurred. And sometimes with technology, I know I've been in some planning committee meetings, zoning committee meetings where the weather was bad, and so someone might lose their signal, lose their connection to the meeting. That needs to be recorded. Sometimes our Wi-Fi is not working properly and you'll lose a connection. You need to let Kirsty know if you somehow been disconnected from the meeting so that that can be recorded properly in the minutes. And again, just like I talked about the public records before, what the legislature wanted to make sure is that we understood, and this is all about transparency to the public, is that when you are in this meeting, you're not together. And what people have a tendency to do, any person that's in a group, is to chat with each other. It's really easy to do. Instant messages, text during the meeting. I understand that if you're doing that during the meeting and that there is a public records request, then any of your chats or text or messages exchanged will be part of the public record. All right, and the last thing I'll talk about is what you already know is that we're streaming this live on YouTube. That's what the city has decided to do. It took a lot of trial and error when we first started doing this in March and April. There's so many boards and commissions that the city has. There's no way that we could have them all on the city's YouTube channel without them conflicting with each other. So planning has this planning, design, and development web channel. So we're making it available to the public there. I don't think this meeting is available on the government channel, but of course the council meetings are available on the government channel, and they're all available on Facebook also. Your quorum, any member participating by simultaneous communication, you're counted as present for the quorum, but you have to make sure that you are, there are certain situations where if you were counted as a quorum for the city council, anyway, if you're counted as a quorum and then you leave, your vote is recorded a certain way. Well, that doesn't work with remote meetings, so you actually have to be present to vote. So it's really important that you are present for all the deliberations and the vote in order for it to be an official vote of the body. And that is all I have. I'll take any questions.
Any questions for Tari? I think we're going to let you off. Oh, there's Eric. He has one.
Yeah. Yep, I did have a question. It was kind of back earlier in your slides. I think it was with the purpose of the TOD regulations and the goals. My question was, could those be a solid, be used as a solid to make a case for denying a particular case that comes before us when we're making our decision? I know it's not officially part of the in the regulations and what we're supposed to look at, but you mentioned a couple of times the goals and then the purpose of the TOD as being something you should look at when you're going through. I just wanted to know legally if there's some clarification there.
I did not add the entire section, but of your alternative compliance, the 15.11, but there are some very specific, I guess what you would call criteria that are listed in that section. So I think those go to how you may consider the goals in relation to a particular application. What my suggestion would be is that you stick very closely to those criteria in the alternative compliance section. So, but if your question is, could someone say that that you said they should not be denied because it's meeting the goals or not meeting the goals?
Should, using the specific criteria and the goals, A through E there, and then I think in the previous, the purpose, those beyond the criteria you just mentioned to make the case for or against? a case, any particular case.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, I think that the goals are in place, but your particular role is determined if there's something unique or particular about the particular application that would make it, I don't want to say exempt, because it shouldn't be exempt completely, but it would give it the ability to not comply specifically with the particular goals for whatever reason, and the reasons are outlined in the criteria in section 15.11. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yes, I guess so. I was just looking for more of, because not every particular piece in the criteria may be expressed as generally as in, the goals, I guess is what my point is. You know what I mean? Like if they can be used in combination, or I'm sure your answer is only sticking to the points in that section criteria only. Seems to me you would advise. Okay.
That's what I would advise. I would think that, and Kirsty, please jump in, but I would think that when the staff makes its recommendation, it's probably going through those criteria one by one and determining if they're going to make a recommendation based on how the application fits in the particular criteria of 15.11.
Correct. So when I did the staff recommendation for that project that we reviewed in May, I specifically looked at what was listed under the ACRC, so 15.11. I didn't look, at these other sections.
Yeah. I guess my point would be, that is very much specified to that particular thing, and I would just hate for us to be missing the actual broader goals as well, to be looked at when we're reviewing a case, or at least being able to cite those as a reason why we may accept or deny our recommendation. So that's the only thing I was hoping for, a little clarification, that if we could use those, because they are broader, but they still should be supportive in a particular review.
I understand what you're saying, and I think that, I hesitate to answer that so broadly, because I think every application is going to be unique, and there may not be a one-size-fits-all answer to that. But I think that there may be certain situations where you could go to the goals and feel like that the application is totally contrary to the goals of the TOD, and you're uncomfortable making a recommendation because of that. Thanks.
Other questions for Therese? Wave your hand if you have one. All right. I think, Therese, we shall say thank you at this moment. Thank you for your time and your education. We really appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll be calling on you for future advice. Thank you.
You're welcome to do that. You're welcome.
All right. So I'd like to move on to the second agenda item, the third agenda item before I do, which is walking through the rules for procedure. It is a 4-page document. Does anyone need to take a minute recess to get water or take a bathroom break? If you do, wave your hand. Okay, if not, then we're going to dive right into this. And Kirsty, are you going to bring up on the screen the rules for procedure?
Yes, let me see. Can't view the content you're sharing. Okay. Can you guys see my screen? If not, I will try the other option. Not yet? Okay.
No, I cannot. No.
Okay. Let's see. Can you see it now? It's a Word document.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
All right,
Perfect. So,
thank you.
So basically what I'm going to do today is we're just going to this. Hopefully you guys had a chance to review this. I'd attached it to the email that went out with the meeting invite, just seeing if people could look at it before we met today, so you can come with any questions or suggestions that you might have. But we're just going to go through it section by section, and I only have one minor recommended edit at the very end, so we'll get to that at the end. But if you have any recommendations or questions, feel free to jump in. Again, as I go through each section, then I'll call for questions. So this, as you'll see in a second, as our adopted rules procedure require at our regular meeting in August, we are supposed to take a look at these rules for procedure and make any edits if needed. So that's really the purpose of our meeting today. So with that, the one change I've made so far eventually will be to change the date. My goal today is for us to review this. I'm going to make edits as as suggested during this meeting. And then my goal is at the end of this meeting that we can vote on it and adopt it. That way we will be set for any new projects that come our way. So with that, we will just start with section 1 here. So committee members, and I'll read through this, and then once I get through section 1, then we'll open it up. So the officers of the Alternative Compliance Review Committee, or ACRC, shall be a chairperson and vice chairperson. Members sorry, it's freezing over here. Members defined as both regular and alternate members, herein referred to as staff is defined as assigned employees by the City of Charlotte Planning, Design, and Development Department. Committee is defined as all voting members, both regular and alternate. The chairperson shall preside at all meetings and have the right to make recommendations on applications for alternative compliance, call special meetings, and request the continuation of a meeting past the 8 p.m. adjournment. The chairperson shall also have the right to meet with the Planning, Design, and Development Director in the event that the committee's recommendation conflicts with staff's recommendation. The vice chairperson shall preside at meetings in the absence of the chairperson and shall have all the rights and duties of the chairperson as listed above. At the regular meeting in June, the ACRC shall elect officers for a term of 1 year. Officers shall take office the following July 1st. If an office becomes vacant during the term, the ACRC shall elect one of its members to serve the remaining portion of the unexpired term. Officers shall be eligible for re-election. At the regular meeting in August, shall review the Alternative Compliance Review Committee rules of procedure and have the opportunity to propose and approve revisions. And then new members must complete the ACRC orientation and oath of office before providing a recommendation at ACRC meetings. So that's section 1. We'll open it up. Does anyone have any questions or recommendations for revisions here?
I have a minor recommendation. If for some reason Dr. Walters and Ms. Kelly cannot make it to the same meeting, we have no provision for that.
Right. I want to say, I'm thinking, I could have sworn that we'd talked about this before, where if that happened, that the chairperson might have the option to appoint somebody else for that meeting. Sherry, did you have something you wanted to add?
That's usually how it's done. If you know in advance, she could appoint someone to chair the meeting, or if you get there and that happens, and the committee itself could appoint someone to preside at the particular meeting.
Okay.
So that can be
So it's
implied. It doesn't have to be explicitly stated.
It's not usually explicitly stated. It's, that's, for instance, that's what happens with the planning commission. If the chair and the co-chair and the vice chair won't be there, they'll appoint someone to preside beforehand. So I don't think it has to be in there. If you'd like for it to be in there, we can get some language for you, but I don't think it needs to be that explicit.
I'm fine with the way it is, Kirsty and Tari. I don't think we need to make a change. Everyone agree? Just give a head nod. Is that right?
Yes, agree.
Okay.
Okay, so section here, we're talking about meetings. The regular meeting date should be the first Thursday each month. Start at 4 p.m. and end by 8 p.m. Meetings will only be held when applications for alternative compliance have been received or if the committee has other business to conduct. Alternates shall attend all meetings and have the right to participate in discussion, but will only make a recommendation when needed to replace a regular member. Any questions or recommendations for changes here? I will take that as a no. So we can go on to section 3 here, where we talk about a quorum. In all circumstances, the majority of the members of the ACRC, not counting vacancies, shall constitute a quorum for the purpose of conducting business. The quorum may be lost due to ACRC's members' conflict of interest or failure to be present for the entire hearing on a particular alternative compliance. Questions or recommendations for revisions here? Okay, so we'll go on to attendance. The ACRC attendance policy shall be the same as the City Council's attendance policy for boards and commissions. Members are required to attend 65% of all regular and special meetings from the time their term begins until the end of the calendar year, and each subsequent calendar year thereafter. Members must attend 50% of each meeting in order to be counted present. Members may not miss 3 consecutive regular meetings. If a member to meet either of the 2 requirements above, they'll automatically be removed from the board per the City Council's policy. All members leaving prior to adjournment shall be excused by a vote of the committee. And then if a member leaves without being excused, the vote shall count in the affirmative. Any questions, recommended edits here? Okay. So we'll go to the next one, which is a longer one, conflicts of interest. With this section, I'll stop at D, so we can do A through D first, and then the others, just because it is a larger section. So A, no member shall make a recommendation on or participate in the consideration of a matter in which he or she has a conflict of interest or has the appearance of a conflict of interest. For the purpose of this section, and by way of illustration, but not limitation, a member has a conflict of interest if they may be impacted financially, either directly or indirectly, from a decision on the pending matter. If they own or lease property that's within 300 feet of the property that's the subject of an application. If they have a familial or personal relationship with the applicant, that's the type that may color their judgment. Or if the member works for any business entity that contributed to the subject of the application. B, to this end, a member shall not communicate a predisposition on any application prior to the consideration of the application at an ACRC meeting. C, a member that has a conflict of interest or believes that he or she may have a conflict of interest shall contact the ACRC staff liaison before the scheduled meeting to ensure that a quorum can be met. D, a member who determines that he or she has a conflict of interest shall declare the existence and nature of the conflict prior to consideration of the matter and shall be excused from discussion and voting on the application. So does anyone have any questions or recommendations for items A through D? Okay, so we'll wrap up this section. So E, a member who believes that he or she may have a conflict of interest shall declare the possible conflict. The ACRC shall make it determined by majority vote of the quorum, excluding the member who may have a conflict of the ACRC on whether or not the conflict of interest exists. If determined that the member has a conflict of interest, they shall be excused from the discussion and voting on the application. F, a challenge of the existence of a conflict of interest may be made by a member, the applicant, or any interested person. Such a challenge shall be considered by the committee, and the committee shall determine by majority vote of the quorum, excluding any member being challenged, whether a conflict of interest exists. If the vote of the quorum of the committee determines that the member has a conflict of interest, The members shall be excused from discussion and voting on the application. G, where a conflict of interest exists, the member with the conflict shall leave the room for the entire item review. H, in no instance shall a member present or present or represent to the committee an application for review. Does anyone have any questions or recommendations on the last part of that section?
On to
I
F.
do.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Mike.
You can go ahead.
I was just going to mention mine was considering we're virtual meetings, how are we going to handle a member being leaving? And is it signing off completely and then signing back on, or what is the acceptable situation for that? And does that need to be even in here, or I'm just curious in terms of that.
Right. Cherie, do you have any recommendation on this? So this actually came up when we were working on the bylaws as to whether or not someone would even need to leave the room, just wouldn't participate in the discussion and vote. Do you have any recommendations on how we could address that?
So it's recommended that the person abstain altogether from participating. So, and usually that means leaving the room. So I would say, since we try to simulate the physical in-person meeting as much as possible, that they probably should sign off from the meeting, and then maybe someone sends them a message and lets them know, you know, when it's time to sign back on again after the consideration of that item.
Okay. Do you think this is something that we need to add to the bylaws since we're still virtual now, or is that just something to understand if it happens while we're meeting virtually that that person will sign off and we'll bring them back later?
So what might be a good idea just in general, so that because, you know, as I said, that remote meeting section is only applicable during declared states of emergency. So what I might suggest is that there's a reference to that section in the rules of procedure so that it will kind of it will be incorporated by reference, basically. And that way you wouldn't have to go through and address all that's in that remote meeting statute. But when you are conducting a remote meeting, we don't know how long we'll have to do this, but for the next couple of months, it will be clear that that's what applies. But I don't know if you need to actually put it in your rules of procedure, since, you know, this may not be a permanent thing.
Okay.
And I can help you with that, Kirsty.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so we'll work on that one, Eric. Michael, Paul James, were you the other member that had a question?
It was along the same lines.
Okay. Okay, so I'll work with Cherie on the language for that, and we'll get that added in here. So moving on to the next section here, we have recommendations. A member shall not make a recommendation on an application for alternative compliance if the member has been excused for a conflict of interest or is not present for the entire hearing. B, any calculation of a quorum shall not include any member with a conflict of interest or who fails to be present for the entire hearing on a particular application for alternative compliance. C, all voting members present shall provide a recommendation for approval of modifications, or denial on the application for alternative compliance unless excluded per section 6.a. All voting members present for the entire hearing and without conflicts of interest shall not abstain from providing a recommendation. Any questions or recommendations here? Okay, so we'll go on to section 7 here. This is on the application submission procedures. Applicants seeking alternative compliance shall consult with ACRC staff prior to submission of materials outlined in section 7.b. The applicant shall be responsible for providing all necessary materials to meet the requirements of this section. A written request to the PD&D director for alternative compliance is required. The request must identify the standard eligible for alternative compliance and must provide a clear explanation of the alternative proposed. Supporting materials should include, but are not limited to, site plans, landscape plans, building elevations, renderings, photo simulations, height plane diagrams, photos of adjacent properties, and any other contextual information that supports the request for alternative compliance. Until the application for alternative compliance meets the requirements of Section 7, it shall be deemed incomplete and not submitted to the ACRC for recommendation. Do we have any questions or recommendations here? I actually have a recommended edit here. So what I'm recommending is taking out that a written request is submitted to the director and changing that to the ACRC staff liaison. Back in June, we took a Todd text amendment before City Council and we switched that up. So anytime somebody submits an application, they would be meeting with me ahead of submitting an application for the ACRC. And when that application comes through, it'll come to me. I'll let Ty know, but ultimately the application and the materials would come to me. So I'm just going to add this in, and then you guys let me know if you're okay with it. And I apologize, where my camera is right where my fingers are. So I'm gonna have spidery fingers for just a second. So
is that just to help procedural flow and to keep it from getting stuck on someone's desk and move quickly?
Kind of, like, I'm the person who does the Todd administrations. I'm the one that they would be meeting with if they wanted to submit an application. So, you know, I would have to meet with them to verify that what they're proposing meets the eligibility requirements for the ACRC. And like I said, I'll be the one, if I do get something, I would make both Ty and Allison aware. But yeah, it makes it a little smoother to go this way. And then again, it aligns with amended in the Todd ordinance. So I'm trying to make sure that they match up, that it's consistent. Does anyone have any questions, or does anyone not agree with that change? Okay, so we will go to number 8, ACRC agenda requirements. Applications and complete submission materials will be due to the PD&D office 4 weeks prior to the scheduled committee meeting. Failure to provide all materials by this date will result in the project not being placed on the committee agenda for recommendation. The total number of items for alternative compliance placed on the regular monthly agenda for the committee meeting shall not exceed 8. Staff may, in its discretion, place additional items on the agenda. Any questions or recommendations on section 8? Okay, we are almost there, you guys. Oh, did I hear someone?
Chris? Yeah, it was just me and Eric. It was not on section 8, but 7. I was just thinking about it. Sorry, I didn't get it to you before we left that section, but I was just thinking about the supporting materials. Should that be worded like necessary supporting materials, or how do they know what is actually necessary and what is the supporting material, just so we always have those supporting materials with the site plans and landscape plans and elevations?
Right, so this is one that we're kind of learning as we go, and since we've only had one project come in so far, it's still a little TBD. So that first application that we reviewed, we had to work with the applicant pretty heavily to make sure that we got the materials that I needed in order to write a staff report. But ultimately, I think the reason that we left the wording like this was because it's up to the applicant to really make a case for why their project should receive alternative compliance. And so that's why we kind of left it a little more open so that they're in control of the amount of detail that they want to give us, the level of, you know, detail with the exhibits. Yeah, so I don't know. It could really go either way, I guess. If you guys have suggestions, we can certainly take them. But I feel like each project might be a little different based on what the request is. So if someone's coming in, you know, to get requesting alternative compliance on minimum building height, then we might need a landscape plan for that. We were trying to make sure that we weren't, I think, asking too much.
Yeah, Kirsty, if I could jump in. We had significant discussion on this when we were writing these. And I think the wording that we came up to, everyone felt comfortable with because we had listed out what we thought they might need. And we left it general enough so that it could cover all of the different possibilities without constraining anyone.
Right.
And Mary, I guess I'm not questioning what was included, but not limited to. I'm fine with giving the flexibility there. I'm questioning whether C is like actually necessary. Like, you know, so it's clearly stated that that is necessary and not, because supporting sounds, I don't know. I'm just making sure that we get something. And I know, Christy, you're always going to be working with them, but if somebody else took your position, we just want to make sure that it's understood that something has to be brought, you know, forth, and it is a necessary part of the application.
So if we look at 7B, the applicant shall be responsible for providing all necessary materials to meet the alternative compliance required. So you're saying in C, you'd like to add supporting necessary materials. You'd like to add the word necessary there?
Yeah, just something to, yeah, that's basically it.
That's fine. I'm good with that. Any other discussion there?
So did anyone have any questions or recommendations on section 8? I think we didn't, but I'm going to ask just in case.
Yeah.
Okay. So section 9, this is on committee meeting procedure. So meeting shall start at 4 p.m. and end by 8 p.m. Items will not be open for review after 7:30 p.m. Members may request a brief recess between item reviews. The order for each ACRC agenda item is first, the chairperson will introduce the agenda item. The staff member will have 5 minutes to present the agenda item and staff recommendation. The applicant will have 5 minutes to present information on the request for alternative compliance. The chairperson will open the public comment period and invite other parties wishing to speak on the agenda to provide input. The public comment period will be limited to 5 minutes of discussion in support of the request and 5 minutes of discussion in opposition of the request. The chairperson will then close the public comment period. Members may question the applicant and/or staff on the request. Staff and the applicant will be given the opportunity for rebuttal and final comments. We might as well just take out that then, right? Okay. The chairperson shall close the agenda item for discussion and deliberation. A member may request the agenda item to be reopened for further questioning. The committee will craft a recommendation for approval with modifications or denial, and then a final vote on the recommendation by the committee will close the meeting. Anyone have any questions or recommendations?
Do we need to, instead of say close the meeting, close the agenda item?
Yeah, I was just thinking that too. Okay. Anybody else?
Kirsty, I was just wondering about the end time. Was there a particular reason that you are setting the end time? You just don't want to go past 8 o'clock?
So when we held our very first ACRC meeting, I think that meeting started at either 5 or 6.
Started at 6. It was 6.
And so that day, I don't think that we left the building until almost 10 o'clock. And part of the reason, you know, we moved the meeting up, and then we're just trying to keep an end time to it. I don't know if we need to or if we should. Do you have any recommendation on that?
No, I had never seen that. I mean, you know, I know that for the council, they have a policy that they won't go past 10 o'clock, but they will go past 10 o'clock if, you know, if they elect to. I'm not sure if you put in your rules of procedure this way. I mean, these are not bylaws, so they're rules of procedure, so you don't have to, you know, it's not to me like a bylaw where you don't have any recourse but to abide by it. But it is saying that you will definitely end at 8 o'clock. You could be in the middle of an application at that time. Of course, you can always continue the meeting, and I would recommend that it be a continuance, so that you don't have to renotice everything. It's just, that was just interesting to me. I don't want you to, I'm always hesitant about definites with something like that, because you just never know what circumstances may be.
Right, and that did come up when we were drafting these, and that's why in at the beginning, under the chairperson's responsibilities, it says that they have the right, where is it?
Section 1E.
The right to request the continuation of a meeting past the 8 p.m. adjournment, because we were worried that we would, you know, maybe one day get in that situation where we started something or there might be one more item on the agenda. So
Okay.
we kind of built that in, but if you have any suggestions, we're happy.
I appreciate
No.
the hard stop, because a hard stop says I'm going to be home at 8 unless otherwise. So if we have an abundance on the thing, then there would be a message that goes out saying, hey, we're going to go past 8, which forces a dialogue. And I think that that's important, particularly for those of us with children.
And I think if I remember correctly, it was also a matter of security staffing in the building.
Yeah, so we did change start to 4, because I think starting at 6, the doors automatically locked, so we were having to it was more complicated to, you know, have you guys come in through the side door, make sure if the public was coming that they were coming through the side door, especially because we didn't know who from the public would be coming. So that's why we bumped up the time to 4. And then again, we wanted a cap on the end time. And hopefully we will never have that many cases coming for us that would make us stay until 8. The TAD standards have been in place for a year and 4 months, and so far we've only had 1 case come through. So hopefully these will be few and far between.
Well, I'll just say that every other board, especially the HGC, that they'll be jealous of you all, and maybe they may have to adopt these same kind of rules. But we'll see how it works. I mean, I'm intrigued, so I'm curious to see how it works for you. But I understand the rationale.
Right. So does anyone else have any questions or recommendations on this section? Okay, so we've got
Kirsty, wait. Kirsty, on that last change, a final vote on the recommendation by the committee will close. Should we say the application?
We said the agenda item because we said agenda item because there would be a possibility that a project, we could get one application with multiple requests. And so we wanted to keep it an agenda item.
All right, that's fair. Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to the last section here. Final decision on application for alternative compliance. Staff will forward the committee's recommendation to the PD&D director within 5 business days of the committee meeting. In the event that the committee's recommendation conflicts with staff's, the chairperson has the right to meet with the PD&D director to discuss the committee's recommendation. The PD&D director may approve with modification, or deny the application in consideration of the committee's recommendation. If alternative compliance is denied by the PD&D director, nothing precludes the applicant from pursuing alternative options through, and then I added in here, filing an appeal with the Zoning Board of Adjustment, rezoning to TOD EX, or from submitting a new request for alternative compliance. And again, the only reason I added that language in here was because we clarified it with that Todd text amendment that we just took through in June. So I'm just trying to make sure that our wording is consistent here. Does anyone have any questions or recommendations here? Okay, so I think what I will do here, and Mary, let me know if you're okay with this. We'll go through and review and adopt the changes, and then I will work with Therese separately on coming up with language for adding a reference to those open meeting rules for procedure.
Right.
And then at our next meeting, we can review whatever language we come up with and readopt the policies. But this way we can at least get this taken care of now, and we can handle the rest. Does that work okay? So
Yep,
I'll just scroll
absolutely.
through so we have a refresher on what we're changing. Go ahead.
Just one note on 10D, pursuing should have a U after the S.
Oh yeah, sure should.
And actually, one more thing on section 5F, I think there should be a comma after the word committee. It's a third line.
The committee.
Because you have two sentences with verbs, so subject predicate got to have the comma, I believe.
Perfect. All right, so we will scroll through really quick. I'm just going to change the here, assuming that we are going to recommend approval. So our changes will be changing the date to today. Let's see what our next is. 5F, adding a comma. Changing that the application will be submitted to me. And again, like I said, I'll let the director know when we receive one, just as I'll let you guys know too, to make sure that you guys have the meeting event on your calendar. We added necessary to supporting necessary materials. Removed it then because it didn't need to be there. Changed close the meeting to agenda item. Added a U to pursuing, and then finally an appeal with the Zoning Board of Adjustment. So Mary, if you want, I'll hand it over to you and we can do a roll call vote. Or actually, does anyone
thank you so much.
Move approval?
Yeah, we need a motion and then a second. So.
I'll make a motion for approval of all changes to the rules and procedures.
I'll make a second.
Thank you. All right. So I will start with the roll call vote. Michael Paul James, you're serving as an alternate for Dr. Walters. Michael Paul James. Michael.
Yes.
Thank you. Michael Bridges.
Yes.
Thank you. Toby Holmes.
Yes.
Eric Deverell.
Yes.
Paige Case.
Yes. Yes.
And we'll have Padma vote for in place of Renee Rubens, who is not on the call with us. Padma?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. And then I as well vote yes.
Great. So all for your time today. Therese, thank you so much for your presentation. We really appreciate it. As of right now, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're covering it. Thank you.
Sure. As of right now, we don't have any applications for alternative compliance that are coming through. So I will go ahead and cancel our September meeting. And then whenever we do have a meeting coming up, then I as I mentioned, I'll bring up whatever additional language Tari and I come up with to these rules for procedure. But other than that, does anyone have any questions or anything they'd like to share with the group?
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for joining us today. It was good to see everyone's faces and hope everyone's staying safe, and we will see you soon.
Thanks, everyone. Stay healthy. Take care.
You have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye, everyone.